Okay, chapter 12 is going to be the era of Jackson, the age of Jackson, all right? And it's got a lot of interesting things about it. Some controversial, some popular. The age of Jackson is a very interesting topic. So let's get started. The first thing that we need to know, though, is in the 1820s, 28s, we're starting to see this growing sense of equality in the United States. We have more voters. And what I mean by that is more people gain the right to vote, which is called suffrage. Okay, the right to vote. If you remember that it used to be white males over 21, Christians that owned property could vote. Before 1828, no more than 27% of eligible voters even turned out to vote. That's way low. Because a lot of people said, just not interested. Only rich people have a say. So you don't see a whole lot of people really taking part in our government. By 1828, that rose to 58%, and by 1840, voter turnout was 80%. That's amazing. Today, not so much. We'd be lucky, even in a presidential race, to have 60%. Okay, but not everybody is going to be eligible to vote. Women, of course, can't vote. Native Americans can't vote, and African Americans, for the most part, cannot vote, especially slaves. Slaves are property. They can't vote. Okay, new states are joining the Union. And states in the West start giving up this idea of having the people, the requirement of having people own land in order to vote. They're just saying, hey, free white men, you can vote. So many people are eager to participate in the elections. Okay, so 1828, more people, more white men are getting the right to vote. Okay, yeah, we got to talk about the election of 1824. Ooh, baby. This is a hot one. Okay. There are 4 candidates, all Democratic Republicans, because the Federal Party is dead. Now, each had support from different parts of the country. All right? John Quincy Adams. Remember, I just kind of talked about him in the last lesson. He is Secretary of State. He is from New England. He is the son of John Adams, the second president. But he doesn't feel real comfortable campaigning, especially with the common folk. Okay? So he seems hard and cold, kind of like his dad. Now, Henry Clay. Remember Henry Clay? He's the sectional leader. He was the war hawk. He's the one that kind of egged on the United States to go to war with Great Britain in the War of 1812. Okay, he's a shrewd politician. He is the Speaker of the House, a very important position, very powerful position. Okay? He is from Kentucky. He does a lot of good things. He makes a lot of great compromises we'll get on later. But his nemesis, his arch rival, is also from the West, and that's Andrew Jackson. Okay? Old Hickory, the hero of the Battle of New Orleans. He is by far more popular with the people than Henry Clay. Andrew Jackson grew up poor. He was born in a log cabin. But he rose to fame and glory. He is actually a very rich man. He owns slaves. He owns a large plantation. But he identifies easily with the common folk. Okay? The fourth guy is a guy named William Crawford from the South, but he gets sick, becomes too ill to campaign. All right? So there you go. Those are the 4 guys. Let's see what happens. Okay, there's no clear winner in this election. Jackson wins the popular vote. But no candidate won a majority in the Electoral College. So if you remember, this has happened several times now. The election of 1800 comes to mind. That if nobody wins a majority in the Electoral College, then it must go to the House of Representatives. So in the House of Representatives, they get to choose the president. Now remember, who's the Speaker of the House of Representatives? Henry Clay. But Henry Clay finished 4th. So he's out of the running. But Henry Clay is going to influence the members, kind of like what Hamilton did when Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr were tied. Clay urges the members not to vote for Jackson, the clearly most popular candidate, but to vote for John Quincy Adams. Yep, there's the bell. Okay, hang on. Okay, so they vote for John Quincy Adams. Now here's the part that looks bad. When Adams becomes president, he names Henry Clay as Secretary of State. Okay, Secretary of State. Guys, back then, what you have to know, if you want to become a president someday, then the job you want, it's not vice president. It's Secretary of State. Think about this. Thomas Jefferson had been Secretary of State. James Madison, Secretary of State. James Monroe, Secretary of State. And even the guy who wins, John Quincy Adams, had been Secretary of State. So if you want to be a president someday, and Henry Clay certainly did want to be president, he gets the job he wants, Secretary of State. So Jackson and his supporters call this a corrupt bargain. They said it's some sort of back office deal that, that John Quincy Adams said, hey, if you vote for me, I'll make you Secretary of State. It looks bad. Now, in reality, there's no proof that there's any corrupt bargain. But to Jackson, he would never be convinced that there wasn't a deal that was cooked. And his supporters believed that John Quincy Adams and Henry Clay colluded together to steal the presidency from Andrew Jackson. All right? So how do you think Andrew Jackson feels about John Quincy Adams? And also, how do you think John Quincy Adams' presidency going to be? You think it's going to be very popular? Probably not, because most people think he stole the election from Andrew Jackson. So poor John Quincy Adams begins his presidency, and it's unpopular. Now, he works for economic growth, okay? He thought that the federal government should help pay for new roads and canals, okay? He's kind of a throwback to, Alexander Hamilton. He thinks the federal government should become involved, all right? This would help farmers, but this backfires. They do build a few canals and they do build a few roads, but certainly not to the degree that Adams wanted. John Quincy Adams also favored projects that promoted the arts and sciences. But people back then said, why are we spending our hard-earned tax money on these frivolous things like arts and science? All right? They're farmers. Unfortunately, they're not very forward-thinking. They don't think that that is important, and they object to spending money on these projects. So all of these programs to promote the arts and sciences fail. All right? So now we need to talk about the election of 1828, okay? 1828, as soon as the bell rings. It stops ringing, okay. Now, Adams is going to face a very uphill campaign for re-election. He's very unpopular. People think that there was a corrupt deal made in 1824. And this campaign is bitter. Oh my gosh, it is nasty. Okay. Adams accuses Jackson's wife of being how do I put this politely, a prostitute. Okay, because this is what had happened, believe it or not. All right. Andrew Jackson's wife had been married once before. Now, her husband run off. She said that they were divorced. She marries Jackson. But guess what? The guy had never filed for divorce. So Jackson's wife was living in polygamy, living in sin. She was married to two men at once, Jackson and her other husband. Now, it sounds like she really did believe that they were divorced, that he had filed paperwork, but they had not. Jackson had kind of solved this. They did get a divorce, and this happens like 20 years ago. All right, everybody thought that that was under the, water under the bridge. But John Quincy Adams brings this up again, tries to disparage his wife. Okay? This campaign is really going to focus more on personalities rather than issues. All right? Jackson calls Adams an aristocrat. They even go on to say that Adams had kind of gotten American women for the Russian nobility when they came over. They accused him of gambling by putting a pool table in the White House. So it's just really nasty. Jackson's also called a dangerous military chieftain, but it doesn't matter. Jackson is extremely popular, and he easily wins. Easily wins. But there's a sad kind of a footnote here. All right, so Jackson wins. The election is in November. He is so excited to go to Washington, D.C. with his wife. She's been vindicated. He buys her a beautiful inauguration gown, and then she gets sick and dies. Dies before the inauguration. So Jackson is crushed. But he blames Henry Clay. Henry Clay. All right? Henry Clay is kind of behind this, he thinks. Kind of cheated him out of his presidency. He feels that Henry Clay is behind this whole idea of disparaging comments about his wife. And he will never forgive Henry Clay. And I'll tell you what, Jackson is a guy who doesn't, let things, go. He holds a grudge. All right? So Jackson is now moving to the presidency as a widower. Now, the one thing the Jackson's election does do, it kind of reflects that growing spirit of democracy. For the first time, Westerners, people out west past the Appalachians, seem like they have a say in the government. All right? Political power is beginning to shift to the west. All right? Shift to the west. Now, his inauguration, it is a brouhaha. Common people from all over come to the White House for the inauguration. They trample all over the carpets. They track mud in. They break some furniture. It's kind of a madhouse. It's really kind of a big old party. And everybody's happy about this. All right? There's one story that said the only way they could get these people out was to roll out a keg of whiskey out onto the lawn where they all chase it out and they slam the doors behind them. All right? But in the 1830s, new political parties begin to emerge. And they grew out of a conflict between Adams and Jackson. Okay, so we start to see some new political parties. The people that supported Adams and kind of that idea between the federal government needing to get involved, they're going to form a new party called the Whigs, the Whig Party. Okay, and these people are going to be kind of like old Federalists, Eastern business people, large plantation owners, and of course the former Federalist Party loyalists. Now, people who support Jackson, remember Jackson in 1824 and 1828 was a Democratic Republican. They're going to kind of drop that. They're going to form the modern day Democrats. Okay? And these people are going to be farmers and shopkeepers and common folks. They are going to be called the Democrats. From now on, the Democratic Republican is over, and the new party is just the Democrats. So now we do have a two-party political system again. Remember under James Monroe, the Federalists had died, and it's just the Democratic Republicans who are running the show. But now we have a second political party emerge, the Whigs. The other thing that we need to talk about is the nominating convention, all right? Up until this time, it was kind of the party bigwigs who got together and said, hey, what do you think? Let's put old Bill up here. Bill is a good guy. We like him. That's going to be our candidate, all right? So the common people, the people of the United States, really have no say on who is going to run for office. It's the party leadership who's putting these candidates up, all right? So each party held a convention and members to come together. So this is going to be the new nominating convention. So they hold these conventions, which you will see today, back in 2012, the Republican National Convention held a meeting that everybody could attend, or the Democrats held a meeting, and they get to vote on who they feel should represent their party. All right? So just like today, the parties hold conventions. And now it's more open. It's no more these backroom, smoke-filled deals going on. It's more open and more democratic. Okay, so there you have it. You have the beginning of the Age of Jackson, the corrupt bargain of 1824, how John Quincy Adams becomes the president with the help of Henry Clay. Many people feel that there was a deal that was cooked. Jackson certainly feels that way in his supporters. Really no evidence of that. But Henry Clay is the Secretary of State. And remember, if you want to become president, back then, the job you want is Secretary of State. Okay? The election of 1828, Jackson crushes John Quincy Adams. A new political party begins with the Democrats, as well as the new nominating conventions. All right, there you go.